Good afternoon and welcome to AGRIFOOD Conversations, brought to you by iSelect Fund, the Van Trump Report, the Yield Lab Institute, and Family Farms Group. My name is Tom Bunn, an associate on the iSelect Fund Ventures team, and I'm excited to welcome you all to our discussion today. AGRIFOOD Conversations is all about driving innovation in agriculture. Each month, we highlight a specific theme, including emerging topics such as soil health, plant genetics, vertical farming, or aquaculture, to name just a few. This month's theme is new innovations around business models in agriculture. And on today's call, we're joined by Jacob Isaac Lowry, CEO and co-founder of FlyWire. FlyWire is a Fish 2.0 company dedicated to solving key efficiency and sustainability challenges faced by the seafood industry today. They are a hardware-enabled software services business that uses imagery and data to bring actionable insights to the global seafood industry. They also apply vessel-level data to help commercial fishermen operate more profitable businesses while sustainably harvesting fish. Leveraging vessel-level data is the future of commercial fishing, and FlyWire is at the forefront. Each of you knows companies are more likely to succeed with the right network of customers, talent, investors, and advisors. We've invited you to this call because you are some of the smartest, most talented people in FlyWire's market. You are potential customers for FlyWire's products and services. You've built a company similar to FlyWire, or you are a sophisticated business person or agricultural professional who understands the market and the challenges and opportunities FlyWire will face. Before we get started, we have a quick poll question to get a better idea of who we have on the call today. Please take a few seconds to answer. Finally, a few process comments before we get started. We are not soliciting investment in any way whatsoever. This presentation is to provide information to help FlyWire find customers, mentors, or other strategic relationships that can help them grow their business. Secondly, you are all on mute. However, you can use the chat window to ask a question at any time. And finally, this presentation is being recorded and will be available for replay. So without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce Jacob, the CEO and co-founder of FlyWire. Take it away, Jacob.
All right, great. Thanks, Tom. So scroll through these here. Great. And again, my name is Jacob Isaac Lowry, CEO of FlyWire. And today I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about why the untapped seafood industry actually has a lot more in common with the ag industry than you might expect. Now, while we do have applications in aquaculture, at FlyWire, we're focused on wild capture seafood. And from looking at these market trends, I'd forgive you for thinking we were crazy, and you wouldn't actually be the first one. But it's important that you need to forget everything you've heard, because the reason that wild capture production has declined from its peak is not because our marine ecosystems can't keep up with current consumption. It's because the way we run the world's fisheries is inefficient and ineffective. In fact, the World Bank estimates we could unlock an additional 80 billion in annual harvest value just by operating the world's fisheries at maximum sustainable yields. On top of that, annual supply could be increased by another 20% simply by reducing the amount of seafood that rots in the supply chain every year before ever reaching someone's plate. So we're talking about the ability to almost double the volume of wild-caught seafood with no additional infrastructure investment or supply chain restructuring required. And despite what you may have heard, aquaculture isn't exactly taking market share from wild-caught product. In this market, the supply just can't keep up with the demand. In fact, growth in demand for seafood has actually outpaced terrestrial protein for the last 50 years. Now imagine how valuable an enabling system would be that could unlock this upside at the relative flip of a switch. That is why we built FlyWire. So what does sustainable fishing actually really mean? In reality, it's pretty simple. Basically, it means that the cross-section of what you take out of a fishery every year doesn't deplete the long-term health of the overall stock. And the target maximum sustainable yield is determined by standard practice population modeling. Now, if you don't have good data on the abundance of the overall stock, or you don't have good data on exactly what is being taken out, you end up with models that have a lot of uncertainty. And uncertain models drive overly restrictive quota. right? No one wants to be the regulator that guessed wrong and crashed $1 billion fish stock. And can you imagine what would happen to agriculture production if state and federal regulators didn't know how much water was in the reservoirs and farmers were only allowed to access 50% of the water they could otherwise be safely using? It's the same thing here. And this matters because seafood is one of the most valuable traded commodities on the planet, and it's a critical piece of the global food system. So right now, it's a huge problem that the wild capture sector is still struggling to ensure the long-term health of critical fish stocks in an economical way. Now, the reason this problem exists is because the data you need to effectively manage these critical food resources is simply cost prohibitive right now at the needed scale, which is a real problem for the seafood industry because unsustainable fisheries produce less fish and they struggle to sell into the best supply chains, which pay the best price. That's why our industry cares about this. And right now, we have a really unique opportunity to address this pain point by fundamentally modernizing the way that seafood is commercially fished. So the basic problem we're solving is that right now, no one really knows what happens out on the water every time fishing boats leave the dock, right? If you plant crops in a field, you know where they're going to be the next day. But fishing takes this challenge to a whole new level. And for a commercial fishing vessel operator, running their business without knowing what actually happens when their boats are at sea is a lot like a plant manager trying to run a factory without ever being able to see inside. It's inefficient. So we built the world's first Fitbit for fishing boats to give our customers the tools they need to boost profitability by bringing their operational efficiency in line with comparable industries. At the same time, the analytics we generate are also used to meet regulator requirements and underpin key product certifications needed to ensure the long-term viability of the food supply. Now, the root of this problem is that data capture in fisheries has always been an expensive cost of compliance. But with FlyWire, for the first time, our customers can turn it into a new profit center. This is real dollars and cents value that McKinsey and the World Bank estimate could save $11 billion in annual operating efficiencies on top of that additional $80 billion increase in annual harvest value. It's a big part of why the market for vessel-level data capture in seafood is projected to increase by 25x over the next decade. Now, for our product, we install our hardware on vessel and then collect data on catch, handling, efficiency, and vessel performance using video, GPS, and other sensors. Our hardware is the first modular, scalable platform that works with any size vessel in the global fleet. We've done work from small artisanal fisheries in Mexico, Indonesia, and Peru on boats as small as 10-foot pangas to larger, more industrial fleets here in the US on the West Coast and Gulf of Mexico. We can support gear types ranging from trawlers to longliners, including pots and traps, and can handle any type of target catch. Now, when the boat returns, data is uploaded to the cloud, and we use AI to help process and then generate reporting for all stakeholders. This includes catch accounting reporting for regulatory compliance and certification, ops insights to track and improve key profitability metrics, and predictive analytics on where and when to fish. You add it all up, and we're talking about changing the way that fishing is done. We're driving new efficiencies in fuel, labor, and product quality for fishermen while verifying sustainability for retailers and regulators. And the business model we've built to do this is straightforward. We have an upfront fee or lease model for hardware and installation, and a back-end recurring fee for data analysis and reporting. Our price point is 10 to 15K per year for the average commercial vessel here in the US, and we project a 12-month payback period for the customer. In terms of customer recruitment, we also don't need to go chase every individual boat. For our customers, we are initially targeting fisher associations or buyers sourcing from large fleets of vessels with acute compliance or certification needs right now. In our market, this particular customer archetype is very sticky with a large lifetime value. And we recruit our customers into annually recurring contracts per vessel. In terms of market size, our total market is the 2.8 million engine-powered commercial fishing vessels in the global fleet, which represents about a $40 billion market opportunity for us. And our target market is the 14,000 vessels here in North America currently seeking to prove sustainability and compliance. And as an additional market upside, the regulatory segment is now opening up in the US as well, starting in 2021. And with this business model breakthrough we developed through Techstars and Elemental Accelerator, unit economics that work with a single boat, we've already been able to land our first big corporate partner, Pacific Seafood. And for our initial implementation with them, they have been trying to get one of their fishing operations certified as sustainable for years, but no one could get the data, not the government, not the NGOs, and they were basically being told this was impossible. In contrast, we came in and knocked out all the proof points in under 6 months and are moving forward with certification now. In terms of our competition, the primary alternative remains paying an outside person to go on every boat and fill out data sheets, which is obviously not effective, especially during COVID. Our secondary competition is the 6 other companies around the world producing a similar product. However, these systems are basically a CCTV security system from a convenience store installed up in the rigging of a boat with a few other sensors to record what they can. They're designed with the government as the customer, and the product market fit has been so bad that governments and NGOs have to pay people to use them. Again, obviously not scalable. In contrast, we are the only ones with an engineered solution, IP protected, that integrates directly into the underlying fishing activity. We get better quality data with minimal impact to the crew's efficiency at less cost. And the reason we are succeeding where others couldn't gain traction is simple. We're the only ones with a solution built to deliver real value to the industry. FlyWire is easier to use, provides better results at less cost, and the industry specifically wants to work with our team. Now, as founders, Sarah and I have known each other for about 20 years. She's a marine scientist who has worked for the government, top NGOs, and has a background in protected species. I'm an engineer trained by Toyota in lean manufacturing and previously ran product development for another startup through to acquisition. Our key business and industry advisors are effective and engaged, and we've already established a formal collaboration with the global gold standard in seafood sustainability certification, the Marine Stewardship Council. And we believe that value creation is the key to a sustainable future in seafood. FlyWire data doesn't sit idle on some government server. We put it back in the hands of seafood businesses with real, actionable insights to help them improve efficiency and make more money on their catch volumes. And with better, more reliable data about exactly what happens out on the water comes a faster, less expensive, and less frustrating journey to sustainability. We believe that the people best equipped to keep our fish stocks healthy are those closest to the problem. And that's the men and women out on the water every day, risking their lives to feed the rest of us. And at FlyWire, our goal is to provide them with the tools they need to succeed in ensuring the long-term viability of their livelihoods. And it's because of that we also believe that we can really change the buying experience for retailers. So instead of being limited in what they can put on their shelves to the suppliers and products they can find out there that already meet their requirements, FlyWire gives them the control to source the products their customers want from the suppliers they want to work with. Then we work directly with those suppliers and their fleets to ensure they make the margins their businesses need, delivering the products their retailer buyers want to their standards and at the price they're willing to pay. And we can also deliver back to the retailer the verified data their marketing team needs to tell the rich, compelling supply chain stories consumers have come to expect from high-end B2C seafood distributors. And with that overview, happy to answer any questions. So thanks so much for having me.
Great, Jacob. Thank you very much, and thank you for the great presentation. So for the audience, You can ask a question now by doing one of two things. You can either use the Q&A box found in the middle of your screen, or you can raise your hand, and I will unmute you to ask your question out loud. Jacob, I guess to get things started, I got a couple questions. Can you talk a little bit more about where you think you'll be in let's say 12 months time, kind of what the rest of 2020 and into 2021 ideally would look like for FlyWire?
Sure. So pre-COVID, we were on a trajectory really to reach about our first 50 vessels in our 2020 fiscal year. It puts us at about 1 million in ARR, looking to scale that to about 6 million in ARR by 2021. Just for anyone who may not be familiar, the way COVID has impacted the seafood industry is not entirely unlike some of the impacts for some of the other protein supply chains. But with seafood, the added wrinkle is that right now about 70% of all seafood in the US is consumed in restaurants. And so with the shutdowns that started taking place in March, that left most of the big distributors in our industry really with a tough decision to make. And that was to whether to try and wait it out or to try and invest in pivoting their distribution and supply chain systems over to retail and B2C. And what we've seen is that there's been a number of companies that have really kind of embraced a middle of the road approach. But for us, what we're really waiting for is to see how quickly the restaurant side of the model bounces back in terms of understanding kind of how long this COVID delay could weigh on our growth trajectory. Right now, it's looking at about a 6 to 9 month slowdown in terms of the ramp rate we were on before. But again, that all kind of depends on how the outbreaks continue to evolve in some of these different states as we move through the summer and into the fall.
Got it. Thank you. How do you think the future looks for kind of the push and pull between traditional fishing and aquaculture? You know, one of the most striking and commonly used graphs I see is I think one you actually had at the beginning about kind of the huge surge in aquaculture. You know, let's take 2050 for instance. That's a date that's often thrown around because it's commonly agreed on that we'll have roughly 10 billion people on the planet by then. What do you think the mix of aquaculture and wild catch looks like in 2050?
So I think, you know, on the one hand, it's logical and it's real. There is a maximum capacity for the amount, the tonnage of wild capture product that can be harvested sustainably from the ocean, the open ocean. I think one of the things, though, that people don't always consider when they think about that is, you know, where that actual ceiling in reality could be, is that if you really think about it, and I do this all the time just for fun, you know, I'll ask people, how many different species of fish, how many different kinds of fish have you ever actually eaten at a restaurant? And for most people, especially here in the US, it's about 5 to 7, you know, and you could rattle them off: salmon, tuna, you know, grouper, etc. But the reality is there's hundreds, if not thousands, of additional wild-caught species that are more than suitable for human consumption that right now can't actually be harvested because the process for establishing that stock as a, you know, here in the US as a federally managed fishery is very cumbersome, very slow. And then once you get that in place, you've got some additional challenges of being able to actually move that into the supply chain. So I think if you were to look at the species that are being caught right now, again, knowing that you have the potential to almost double that capacity by doing nothing else other than increasing the productivity of those fisheries through sustainability and also attacking the amount of waste in the supply chain as it sits right now. And then I think you've got the opportunity to potentially increase that by another 30 to 50% by tonnage by actually moving to market underutilized species currently. So with that as the backdrop, I think that for longer than most people are looking to admit, maybe not all the way to 2050, you're going to you have the opportunity to see wild capture and aquaculture pretty much stay in a 50-50, 60-40 type of balance for probably the next 10 to 15 years. But I would anticipate that by 2050, you're going to end up with aquaculture taking the predominant share, maybe 60 to 70%. But I think the difference is not every species of fish is suitable to be raised in aquaculture. Aquaculture itself has its own problems in terms of geography and space and resources and climate impacts that it will start to bump up to once you begin to reach carrying capacity on that side. So I don't think it's as simple as just a transition from one type of catch to another type of farming. And I think really if we're looking at this responsibly in terms of maximizing the availability of the food supply to the planet, we're really going to need to be working on both sides of this challenge if we're going to be as effective as we can.
Great, thanks, Jacob. John Jefferson, one of the attendees, asks, are there things fishermen, quote, don't want to know or be known, end quote? And if so, how do you mask or anonymize data?
No, so that's a really great question. And I think I'll preface that by saying it has been our experience that the vast majority of fishermen are hardworking, honest, trying to get up every day and do the best job they can, taking a lot of pride in their work and taking a lot of pride in preserving the traditions of their livelihoods. Most of these businesses are multi-generational businesses that have been around for nearly 100 years. And there is no one that we've found more invested in maintaining kind of transparency and responsibility of this resource utilization than the industry itself. So with that, really what we found that's the most sensitive information that a given fisher can have is what they would consider to be their trade secrets. So special fishing spots, seasons, times, how they respond to water changes, things like that, that could be a competitive advantage for the boat in the next slip were we to disclose that publicly. So the way we handle that is that data at that level of granular detail, we only show that back to the actual vessel that generated it. Now, if they want to anonymize it, scrub it, say take all of, say the total number of fishing hauls done by 400 boats in a groundfish fishery, anonymize that in one big pile and turn that over to an NGO as part of a larger assessment because they could make a little money off of that, we can help facilitate it. But the other piece in terms of what goes to sustainability certifiers and to the government, anything that goes to the government is a protected federal record, and under specific federal legislation passed back in the 70s, Magnuson-Stevens Act, the federal government is obligated to treat that data that they receive with a very strict level of confidentiality for specifically that reason. And the sustainability certifiers, if you think about it kind of like getting your traditional factory ISO compliant, that type of audit, they also hold all of that data in confidence and only release kind of high level aggregated summaries in their public facing reports.
Got it. And John Jefferson also had a follow-up question. He asks, is there a bandwagon effect for adoption? That is data or insights sharing?
Yeah, 100%. So there's actually a lot of precedent in fisheries in terms of new technology uptake. And the way it normally works is because fishing, it's a commodity business. It's a low margin business. You'd be shocked at the actual price per pound that the people who do the most of the work in catching the seafood get paid versus what you pay when you buy it at the grocery store or the restaurant. So for them, what normally happens is you'll have a larger processor, someone like a Pacific Seafood, that's better capitalized, that's in a better position to make some investments, early investments in new technology, because they feel that it can deliver some additional value into their existing supply chain. And then once you have that early pilot, that first demonstration, if you can actually deliver that value, now you've created a real actionable competitive advantage for the boats that are utilizing these new tools compared to the ones next to them at the dock that aren't. And that is normally the impetus that starts driving a little bit more organic adoption horizontally within a given fleet. And you could look at, a number of examples. One I always like is, an old story I heard back in the 70s down in the Gulf of Mexico. They used to have to try and catch all of that shrimp and keep it on ice, which meant the boats could only be at sea for a few days before they had to come back. There was a processor down in Louisiana that thought they could get an edge if they could put a freezer system on board so their boats could stay out longer, fish more, burn less fuel per pound caught, and give them an edge. That freezer system worked, and within 12 months, almost every boat in the fleet had one installed, and they're still using that same type of system today, 40, 50 years later.
Great, thank you. Lee Rogers asks, how many full-time employees and how many salespeople do you have?
Sure. So we're small right now. We've got 3 full-time employees. We've got a couple contractors we work with. And then we do most of our sales face-to-face. It's a traditional market. So we've got a sales team of 1 right now. But we are actually participating in the Yield Lab Accelerator this year and have some interesting new types of sales models that we've been learning from with some of our cohort companies that we're interested in trying. Specifically this concept of the fisherman dealer. Because these guys, they're already on the dock. They already have the relationships. Everything in this industry is really relationship driven. And we see that as the easiest way to be able to drive scale faster versus, you know, a typical B2B SaaS company doing digital marketing or something like that.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. Well, Jacob, how can the audience help you out? Is there a way they can reach you? Or a way they can use the power of the market network we have here to help you out in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. So contact information right there on the slide. I think for us, one of the things that we found can be kind of difficult is because seafood in particular can be kind of an insular community, is any potential introductions to people in the buying space for any of the large retailers that anyone may know. Obviously, you know, connections, it's been a great experience for us kind of getting aligned in this ag tech space just because of the market parallels. So, you know, any introductions to people that have had prior experience building new companies, kind of breaking new ground, anyone that's been involved kind of in the early days on the ag tech side would be great to connect with and talk and learn a little bit more about, you know, how you can be more aggressive in driving disruption, what works, what doesn't. In these types of industries that, again, are commodity, low margin, and, you know, have some pretty high risk involved with them.
Great. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all in attendance for joining us as well. Please do reach out to Jacob to offer your helping hand in whatever way you can, or if you have any follow-up questions. As a reminder, we host these calls every week at 3 p.m. Central, so we look forward to hopefully seeing you next week. And in the meantime, stay safe and be healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.